Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, may I have your attention, please? Are you ready to engage in a mind-blowing experience and hear talks about life, technology, entertainment, and business? The next episode of HIPTHER Talks starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Hi guys, welcome back to the HIPTHER Talks. We are very happy about the feedback we are receiving about our podcast launched in 2022, and here we are at our next episode where we have some special guests from Other Levels. It's Jenny Liu, General Manager North America at Other Levels, and Joe Hannaford, General Manager from Europe at Other Levels. Hi guys, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, nice to. Well, you'll hear us all.
Okay, so before we dive into the questions, I would just like to ask you guys to give a short introduction of yourselves. So let's start with Jenny.
Perfect. So my name's Jenny. I'm the General Manager of the North American office for Other Levels. I'm primarily responsible for the growth of the North American division. So sort of just the growth into the US and Canada. I'll hand it over to Joe to introduce himself and also explain a little bit about what Other Levels does as well.
Hi, I'm Joe. I'm mainly focused in the EMEA region. I'm mainly around the customer success, obviously for our customers, but also for our products. So Other Levels at its core is a CRM system for mobile apps, mobile web, and desktop. That allows our customers to reach their customers across multiple channels in the right way. But we've also, heading our innovation sort of arm, we've been moving into what we call an engagement platform. And that's focusing in the sports area, sports betting area. And that tries to reach out to customers on the right channel at the right time in real time based on their behavior, but also based on the behavior of matches in sports. So marrying those two up along with customers' betting behavior to try and not only obviously help our customers hit their targets, but also to give a more personalized and customer-centric slant to the messaging rather than it just be straight offers.
All right, thank you for this brief introduction. All right, so let's have fun. Today we are going to talk about perfecting player engagement in sports betting and approaching it if it's a pipe dream or a reality. So we are going to have a little bit of ping pong today with the questions, as we are going to focus on North America and the European region. So my first question is, whoever wants to pick it up is, can you describe the state of sports betting globally? What are some key differences between markets and or regions? So I guess we have this question for both of you.
Yeah, so I'll sort of pick it up from like the traditional betting region of Europe and especially the UK. It's always led the way in the gaming and gambling market. There's very, very established brands over here.
Yep.
And it's still the main market share of the 150 to 200 billion US dollars that are out there in this space. Most of it is Western Europe still. But obviously, when you've got like states like New York coming on board, and the size of that population is the size of a European country, then it's going to change somewhat. And the way that, and we'll go on to speak about this today, I suppose, is that the way the American market will influence back over here I think it will be surprising for some people, because I think traditionally, a lot of people would have thought, we'll come over to the US with our UK EMEA-centric branding and way we speak to our customers and the way we do things online. But, customer service and the way customers are treated in America is a lot different to the UK. Some people would say it was a lot better. So actually that might bring out a lot of different things. And also, globally, a big thing that's happened is, I think over the last 2 years, especially during this pandemic, because of financial situation, is there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions. There were always lots of mergers and acquisitions in gambling, but they've ramped up. And you've got some really big companies now, right? You've got Flutter, which is an absolutely huge FTSE 100 company.
Growing every month.
Yeah, which trades over every single region. And, that brings some advantages, but it also brings some difficulties for those companies, like all the synergies that they've got to create, all of the things that other challenger brands, which some of their brands were originally, they might miss out on those things. So how that's going to play out in the next couple of years will be interesting. And then again, especially during this pandemic, regulations has come on a lot. There was a lot of regions that said, nope, you're not allowed to promote to anybody during the pandemic, which is probably a good thing. It was difficult for us marketeers, but you got people were in the situations they were in, so that was probably a good thing in a way. But how people come out of that will be interesting. It gave people time to look and reset on how they market to the customer, what they're going to market with. And then, a few interesting things came out of the sports betting region, right? Football was the biggest betting market in soccer in the UK, biggest betting market in the world. But again, the NFL is the biggest sport, probably. Some people would argue that soccer is, but NFL probably for the amount of data that comes from it probably is. So it'll be interesting to see how the US goes to that. So I'd probably say that'll be, those are the things. And then the US market is always been expected and promised so much, but nothing really ever happened. And it does feel like it's an inflection point. I mean, I think Jenny would probably say that now.
Yeah. So let's see what is the situation in the promised land.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the situation in the promised land is that it is a growing market. I mean, it's what Joe said, like it's the US market, but at the same time, each of the states themselves are almost like its own little country. And the way that they regulate is like they're regulating country by country or state by state, because each state has its own rules and regulations. There's some states that have no sports betting. There's some states that allow for sports betting, but no online wagering. There's some that have online wagering, sports betting, but no iGaming. So each state has its own different rules and how they operate. The taxes are different. How they market can be different. And at some point, it almost feels like they're making up the rules as they go along, because it's so new. So it's exciting because there is a high growth market. It's like people have access to this newly regulated market. In terms of the people themselves, it's not like they're unfamiliar with sports betting, because there was sports betting previously. And then there's also the black market that still operates there. And the other thing is fantasy is massive, is absolutely massive in the US. And while it's not exactly sports betting, it requires you to have a deep understanding of sports, of players, probably even deeper than sports betting itself, because you're looking at the players' stats. So, I mean, they're massive sports fans. They're massive data geeks in terms of like understanding the players, the scores, like, the stats and everything. So it's a pretty natural transition for American fans to become sports bettors. So you have a pretty good solid base of people that, like a market that you can start targeting already. So that's, I think, the highlight of the American market, and obviously like GDP, like a relatively wealthy country and so forth. Yep. So, yeah.
So I guess the key word here to describe the state of sports betting globally is that it's growing. It's growing fast.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Yeah, and to go back to Joe's point in regards to the pandemic and restrictions in some countries, in some Baltic countries during 2020, restriction in terms of not accepting players or wagers in online casinos were totally restricted. So basically, online activities were also shut down in some countries, so which was really crazy. All right, so what does player engagement look like right now? Perhaps let's start with first in the growing North American market.
Yeah. So the North American market's a little strange. So because it's growing state by state, it's operators are focusing on that market, access to market first strategy, which means it's all about acquisition rather than engagement or retention. So everything's about just growing the market base and growing like their customers and trying to get as many customers as possible. They haven't really focused that much on the retention. Obviously, people do the basics of retention, like you have to. So you're looking at life cycle marketing as the primary strategy right now. So it's very traditional retention marketing. You're looking at, who are your new players, who are your active players, trying to prevent a bit of churn. And then there's a lot of promotional marketing. How do we get these players to spend it comes with the acquisition, let's give them risk-free bets, let's give them deposit bonuses and this other bonus and that other bonus. So it's very promotional. So that's sort of what the marketing is right now, which isn't quite engagement marketing. So it's not quite, trying to get them to commit to the brand or just being active and getting them to spend without giving them free money. Like that's not not the most profitable strategy and not the sort of like the most sustainable strategy either. So I think as competition happens, as it's sort of, I think for the short term, as states continue, that's still going to be like what it is in the US. It's still going to be about acquisition and giving them, trying to get as many customers as possible. As that sort of, slowly slows down, especially in some states where I think, like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, where it's been there for quite some time. And then with increased competition from other operators, they're going to have to look at other strategies, especially smaller operators. They can't come in and offer or, have the same marketing budget as these large brands that have been there. So they're going to have to look at new ways to engage with players. And I think that's where innovation will come in. And that's where player engagement will actually come in rather than sort of promotional marketing.
Yeah, especially since the audience who is listening to this now in March, it's probably March Madness going on where promotions are going to be crazy.
Exactly.
All right. So how does that differ from more mature sports betting market?
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that you thought you would think that operators who have operated in Europe, who have gone over to the US, would have learned from what happened to themselves 5 years and 5 years ago.
They did not learn. It's the goal. It's the goal.
There was a race to the bottom through the acquisition channels. CPA went up. There was a lot of churn, a lot of reactivation going on, a lot of free bet budgets, which then had to be reined in. So then obviously that the market over here has matured and understood that actually you need to communicate to customers in a personalized approach, not just from the content perspective, but on what marketing channel, when is it automated? Some people you do need to still give offers. Some people you don't need to give offers, but you need to give them the experience. But on the other hand, you've got to remember is that you've got to get the market share. So in America, like you can't say that anybody's done anything wrong because the customers need to be acquired and you need to get that market share to be able to do any of those things and then to be able to reinvest and do those. To do all these innovative marketing things, and that we probably learned that in the UK and EMEA as well, that the challenger brands who have not been able to keep running that acquisition, then when they haven't had the base to be able to run all these tests or do all this personalized communication, then they may have lost out a little bit. So it is a difficult one. It's a strange. I always find it's strange is that people will bet if they want to bet. Like there's only a certain pool of people. You can convince other people in other types of products to buy things. But gaming and gambling, if someone wants to do it, they will generally do it. If they don't want to do it, they generally won't do it. So it's an interesting way, and that's why I think that personally there is a finite amount of people that you can market to. So you need to be able to market to them in the right way. Once you've started speaking to them and they're with your brand, because there's only so much acquisition and retention and churn that you can take, really. And I think but maybe the American market will be different, right? Maybe it's so big, or it will, or the way that they communicate will be different. So it'll be an interesting time, and that's what I was saying. Like I think we'll learn a lot to bring back over to the UK and EMEA from that market to actually maybe reinvent how we market over here as well.
Yeah, I remember when back about 8-9 years ago, CPA costed around 500, 600 euros.
Yeah,
for the affiliates.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing, right? And you can see why it's fair. Like you've got to do it, and it's easier to get your acquisition channel up and running because there's loads of agencies that'll do it for you. They've proven themselves. They're good agencies. They know what they're doing. You should do it.
Yeah.
But you've also got to remember where that's going. You can't just leave that traffic in the ether and just lose it because you've spent the money. So
all right.
And that's about the CPA cost at the moment in the US.
Okay, so it's back to the old high prices then. Exactly. All right, so pipe dream or reality? What is the ideal player engagement strategy that everyone wants to achieve? Who would like to take this one? Just raise your hand.
You want to take this? Because
I think
a more mature market.
Yeah, well, like from my perspective, a player-first approach, it's always that is the heart of a successful business. I think that may have got lost quite a lot of the time in every business. But I think you always, even especially in the marketing world, like it's got to be player-first approach. From the product perspective, it's got to be a player-first approach. And then the business obviously needs to weigh that up against what their targets are, right? But as the number of channels and campaigns grow, it's very difficult to work out what's beneficial, what's not beneficial. The gaming market and lottery industry is a lot further ahead than other industries, and it was a lot further ahead. But I believe in recent years that gap has come down a lot, and actually it's probably stagnated. And with all these mergers and things like that, other industries have managed to, and other challenger brands within the industry have managed to get ahead. Mm-hmm. But also, gaming and gambling, one gives you the data points, but it also has the channels to get that out there. And it does have most systems and most brands do have the things where they can do the multivariate testing, they can experiment quickly, optimize. And then that gets to your point of, the ultimate ideal player strategy for me might be one communication ever. For someone else, it might be 100 communications across 100 channels. It's finding the balance between the two, because you can't do it for one individual person, but you can do it as much as you can. But the big thing is always need to know when to stop. Don't over message, don't target chooser on every channel. Just because you've got a number to hit doesn't mean just send more.
Yeah, that's the harsh reality.
Yeah, it's the harsh reality. You get to the end of the month, you go, oh look, our CPAs are high. Churn rates are too high. Right, we've got to get an email out. But the email to that user, those types of user might only work 0.01% of the time. So is there other things that you can do? Have you got other channels? Have you got another way of targeting them? Could you have spoken to them earlier? Could you have prevented that churn? Yeah, of course you could. And there's systems out there that allow you to do that. But you've got to be prepared to reevaluate iterations on the fly and get there. You see it in other industries, right? Where people will send out an email at the end of the month and hope that works. Gaming and gambling is too mature for that, right? You can't do that.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is the part for the harsh reality from a mature market. Maybe Jenny, you would like to add something to this as a pipe dream in North America?
Absolutely. So I think when Joe was talking about sort of the messaging at the right time, I think one of the things that in North America that they're still not really doing very well is messaging in real time. So that email at the end of the month or the email tomorrow is too late, because when someone wants to make a bet, they're making a bet now, today, not tomorrow, not next week, not the week after. They're interested in it now. So when you don't have real-time communication or real-time marketing, you're losing out on a big portion. The other thing is, and I don't think this is specific to Americans, I think this is worldwide, like people are used to convenience and they're used to modern technology and getting information now. If you think about Netflix, if you think about Amazon, Spotify, they're giving you recommendations, they're giving you what you want to watch now. They're making it easy as well.
Makes you think less.
Yeah, the less thinking, the more convenient. If I need to swipe my finger to make a bet, that's what I want to do. Like, ideally, you don't want them to go to the sports book, open up, find the sport, find the game, make the bet. That's like 5 steps too much, basically. So a lot of it is about convenience. I think the pipe dream is convenience and making it easy, giving them the message, but then making it easy for them. So if you know the sports bettor is going to make a bet, if you know that they're interested in NFL, if you know their favorite team is the Patriots, and there's a game on tonight, why are you not, and they haven't made a bet on the game tonight, why haven't you messaged them, say 90 minutes before the game? Because that's typically when someone would make a bet. Why are you not messaging them when the game starts? Why are you not messaging them at the first touchdown? These are things that they're interested in. They probably don't find it overwhelming because they're a fan of the Patriots. It's their favorite team, right?
And it's related to them. Yep.
It's related to them. Exactly. It's the reason why they don't care if they get a casino marketing message, because that's not what they care about. That's not why they signed up with you, So I think it's giving them messaging, and it's not necessarily promotional messaging that they care about either, because if they're not going to make a bet, if they're not a bettor and they get promotional messaging, they're probably not going to bet anyway. But if they're better and you give them the right bet that they want to make with it, and they just can make it with a swipe of a finger, then they're probably going to do it. So it's about sort of combining what the player actually wants to receive and sending it to them at the right time without overwhelming them, but giving them relevant messaging that they actually want to receive, right? If they're going to make a bet, the choice is probably between one operator versus the 4 other operators that they have on their phone. So which operator is it going to be?
Yeah.
It's the one that's going to make it easy for them.
All right. So basically, you just partially replied to my next question, which is what could operators be doing right now to reach the ideal engagement strategy? So who would like to take this one?
No, I think just building on what Jenny said, really, I don't think operators they have the information, they have quite a lot of the systems, they have, they have the player safety, the KYC, they have all of those systems ready and able to do things. I I think it's just maybe a mind shift in marketing. I think maybe it actually is a willingness to try things, because it is difficult working in a business. The fear, if you don't want to, what you do works, why would you change it? Because that it does work, and some of the things that you do, but how can you optimize and how can you get there quicker is the right thing. And that's the point I would like to reiterate. It's about what experience you're giving to the player. So like, are you looking after them? Are you giving them the right propositions? Are you messaging them the right content? Because you're an entertainment provider as well. That's why customers with you. You want to look after them. You want them to have a good experience with your app. You want it to work, app or website. You want it to work well. You want it to have the right messaging. And like to Jenny's point, we were saying about the other brands in other spaces in media where they've been able to use the data to give customers a really good experience. That's something we should take on board, because instead of saying, okay, yeah, here are all the people about to churn, I'm going to give them some free bets. It might not be about that. It might be about what experience can I give that customer, or do they need a break, or do they, is this not going to interest them? That's why. I mean, it's quite an idealistic view of the world, but I think that's where we could get to. And I don't see technology and the data that we have today being a barrier to that at all.
Okay, so ideal player engagement strategy. We have multiple podcasts online. You can find them if you search for them. You have experts on marketing speaking about it. But what are the obstacles preventing the operators from reaching these goals? Because there are plenty of information everywhere, but there are still obstacles.
The number one obstacle, I would say, is excuses.
That's the usual one.
Yeah, there's always an excuse not to, right? We don't have the resources. We don't have the time. We have conflicting priorities. Our technology, we're in the midst of changing our technology, or our technology doesn't support it. It's too much effort. And that's the reality of it, right? Is if we have the data, if we have the technology, if things are there, why are they not doing it? It's, there needs to be that will to actually make the change, to say, okay, here are the barriers, but we can overcome it. There's always going to be barriers. There's no sports book. There's no operator out there that's like, yes, we have all the time in the world and we have all the resources in the world to do this. Of course, you need to push something back, or of course you need to prioritize. But it's, I think, taking that mindset and saying, yes, I want to have a player first strategy. I want to be customer centric. I want to do all this, and I'm putting this as one of my priorities, and this is what it's going to take.
Yeah, it's also a sustainable business plan.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think honestly, the number one obstacle is all the excuses of why we shouldn't be doing this right now.
Okay, Joe, would you like to add more to this?
Yeah, it is strange. Like if you understand the gaming gambling industry, the amount of technology providers that are out there, the amount of half integrations, half data loops, all of those things that have happened, yeah, they're hard to unpick, right? But you can unpick some of them. Yep. So if you could unpick some of them, let's go ahead and do that. And with the way that software works these days, is you can use third parties to do things that will feed back to you in real time. You're not going to be waiting 2 weeks for a data set to come back to you, all of those things. I think people might have got a bit jaded with technology companies, to be honest, with software companies, that when things have said like, oh, okay, yeah, you can do this and we'll give you the data, and the data doesn't come back for a month. So then how can you do something in near to real time? Or how can you be customer centric when you're a month out? But that's not the case anymore. The way it works is it can come back in real time, or you can interact with messaging real time, you can report on it real time, you can change your segments in real time. But that obviously requires you to, one, take a leap of faith and trust that technology works, but also two, actually, like Jenny said, have that mindset that I want to be player centric.
All right. So now for the audience who has not left this podcast yet, because we have pointed out the obstacles.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So it's now time to talk about the benefits, and I'd like to ask you that what are the opportunities and benefits for casinos and sportsbook operators that enhance their player engagement strategy? Those people that go over these type of obstacles, what is in for them?
Well, I think there's so many opportunities and benefits. The main ones sort of being increased retention and increased revenue, or like the spend that they have with you. So, with increased player engagement, you're going to have players that are going to be stickier to your brand. They're going to stay with you for longer. They're going to talk about you. So you probably likely get referrals and acquisitions that way. The more customer centric, I mean, if you think about like outside of the gaming world, when you buy something, the first thing you do is look at the reviews, right? So you're looking for positive feedback. So player engagement allows you to those players to have a positive experience with you. So they're going to give positive feedback. When you're going to a sports book and it's the first time you're going to make a bet, you're probably going to ask a friend who's a bettor. It's like, what sports book would you recommend? So the better experience that you're giving the players, the more likely you're going to increase your acquisition as well, because they're going to recommend your brand to their friends. You don't need to give as many bonuses. If they like spending with you, they're going to continue doing so. If other brands give bigger bonuses, it's probably a short-term gain. They'll probably go there, get the bonus, and then come back to you, because at some point the bonuses are going to stop. And who are they going to spend with? The brand that they like, the brand that they have a better experience with. And then in the long term, what you'll see is increased player value, right? So you're spending so much on acquisition, your acquisition costs, the CPA costs are through the roof. How are you going to mitigate that? What you want to do is increase your LTV so that, it doesn't matter if your CPA is $1,000 and your LTV is $10,000. Doesn't matter, right? How much your acquisition cost is, because you're going to get a return on it. So the more player engagement, or the better experience you're going to give your players, the longer they're going to stay with you and the more they're going to spend with you. And that's all the benefit you need there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And do these impacts vary by global region or by market maturity?
I wouldn't say so. I think very similar in a way. I think we touched on it before. There might be a bit of a different way of how the acquisition and bonusing works in Europe these days, especially with some of the regulation. But I would also say, from a product perspective, there are some amazing products out there. Like, there has been some amazing innovation by companies. Not only in the propositions that customers can bet on, how they can be marketed to, like the guides that they get, the player safety that's out there. All of that is, amazing innovation and brilliant. Getting like Jenny was saying, utilizing all of those and communicating to customers in the right way around those things that you have can make your brand really sticky, right? I think maybe Jenny might want to comment on this, I suppose. Obviously, especially in the UK, we had very traditional online, offline brands, like high street brands, which obviously gives you a lot of trust and a lot of brand awareness straight away. So that might be different. I mean, and America does have obviously those huge casino brands that have always been there and are actually huge entertainment companies now. So it will be interesting to see if, maybe challenger brands and, some of the smaller brands from the UK that have gone over to North America, whether they could compete with that entertainment brand, those kind of entertainment brands, because they've got such an opportunity to bring all of that, all of that weight behind them and all the features that they have into their products, which could, make amazing products, especially with a track record of what gaming and gambling people have been able to do with their products. So yeah, I think that will be an interesting thing to watch out for in the future.
All right, so let's get to the technical part of things then. So is the revenue impact of a player engagement represented only by the reduction in churn and platform switching, or is there an opportunity cost in terms of potential revenue missed?
Well, I think it's more costly for an operator to lose a player, right? Okay. So the reduction in churn is important. But the more engagement that you have with the player, the more betting opportunities you can introduce to that player as well. So basically, the more revenue opportunities you have. So that could be additional bets or introducing them to different markets or different games or, cross-selling them to casino. So there is the opportunity cost and potential revenue. So that additional incremental revenue that you're going to get from a player. But again, it's sort of you start off with player retention, I would say, player retention being that reduction of churn and platform switching. And then when you move to player engagement, that's really when you look at additional and incremental revenue, where you're sort of engaging the player to be active in your platform and really getting them to try different things, try different features, try different opportunities to spend with you.
Got it. Okay, so just another question would be that how can operators segment their players more effectively from a marketing standpoint? And let's start with you, Jenny. How can the new, somehow we can call it new, sports betting or casino operators in the US segment their players?
I think you always have to start off with the basics, the traditional. So you go player life cycle, new customers, active customers, churn customers, then reactivated customers. Then you want to look at broad preferences. So on broadly speaking, are they casino players or are they esports players? Then what games are they interested in? What sports are they interested in? What teams are they interested or betting on? What markets? And then you can target them on their interests and their preferences. And then look at things like, how do we influence their behavior after that? So you can segment based on their preferences and their interests. You can then look at changing behavior or influencing their behavior. Maybe they're money line better and you want to introduce them to different markets. Maybe you introduce them to betting on props instead, not instead, but in addition to, rather. Maybe they're straight money line better and you want to introduce them to parlay betting. So it's giving them experiences, additional experiences, so that there's that engagement around your product, but it's also at the same time you're also learning behavior as well. So you're using the segments to then sort of learn and change the way you market to the players, but ideally you're also sort of encouraging them to behave in certain ways as well.
Okay, so North American marketing strategy for segmenting players, it's back to the drawing board, basics.
Basics, and then you add on to it. So you start with the basics and you start doing little segments and adding on and making it a little bit more and more sophisticated.
Okay. Joe, how do operators in more mature markets do they have a different segmentation strategy?
No, I think, the traditional conversion optimization, R&D, R&B, early life, VIP, all of those things are still really, really important, but it's probably how you build those within those. So say traditionally we would say like, okay, early life is the first 7 days of a customer's life. But for one customer, that could be the first 5 hours. And for one customer, it could be the first 2 weeks. And that's where we think you should try, where we can do some innovation there, is that each individual player should be on their individual sort of timeline for their journey. I might churn within 3 days because that's just what I do. Someone else might take 2 months to churn. But we should both have the same experience, but we should have it in our marketing experience, and the communications we receive should just be in a different time frame, and maybe even on a different channel, for example. So I think that's where people started to get to. And I think people, have learned quite a lot of things. Like, say you would say traditionally, okay, right, this person plays these casino games at this RTP. Okay, they've started to churn. We can see their session length's gone down, their spend's gone down. Okay, we're going to try and cross-sell them to a similar RTP game. But then you've sort of forgotten that actually they tried that game 2 weeks ago and they made a loss on it. So in a bettor's mind, that's an unlucky game. Maybe not with another operator, just with you. So they might go and like that game, they might go and play it somewhere else. So you just have to accept that. And so then what else can you do? Can you then look into your data and say, okay, well, people who do that actually then go and play these types of game. Same in sports betting, right? Traditionally, we would have said, okay, someone who plays soccer, bets, pre-match in soccer, let's try and get them to bet in play. And then generally they'll bet on tennis as well. And then we'll try and cross-sell them to a casino product. Okay, our most profitable casino product is games because the RTP is lower. But actually, when you look into all the data, you could have cross-sold them to something completely different, because that's actually where, their interactions happened. So I think we may have lost sight of that a little bit. And I think that's where the big opportunity is, right? Is that do that at speed, do that and try and iterate it. And companies are doing it, right? There's some really good propositions out there. And you can see it happening, which is a really good thing, nice thing to see.
Yeah. At one of our conferences in January at the Gaming Americas, we talked about player acquisition in the US, where everyone is bombarded with banners everywhere just for player acquisition. And has the emphasis on new player acquisition impacted US operators' ability to engage players on a long term? And are they shaping the state-by-state virgin markets in a way that encourages value seeking at the expense of player life value? Or
I think to some extent, yes. And there are always going to be those players that seek the bonuses or seek like the extra promotions. In the long term, I think as operators, so we kind of need to wait for the operators to die down on that strategy a little bit.
When will that happen?
Yeah, probably a couple of years, but it's because, as long as all the operators are doing it, it's easy for players to just, look for those offers. At some point though, especially around sports betting, less so in the casino side, but especially around sports betting, there's going to be less and less of those offers or free bets that come through, just because they do need to make it sustainable too. And a sports bet, someone that's going to bet on sports is going to bet on sports. So if there are no free offers for them, they're still going to make a bet regardless. So I think that's where you can engage those players in the long term. It's always going to be harder. And I think that's also why people say the majority of people have about 5 sports betting apps on their phone, because it's easy to see you get $1,000 free bets here, you got $1,000 free bets there. You probably want to utilize all your free bets first before you then figure out who you want to actually stay with. So there is the opportunity. At the same time, I think you're still going to have a couple of years of those value-seeking players out there.
Okay. So since we touched based on lifetime value, Jenny, I will ask you first. Can you expand on the concept of player lifetime value, LTV, as you called it also earlier? What does this mean to the operators in the US?
So the lifetime value is basically how much they spend throughout the lifetime of them being with you. It's still pretty early days in the US. So we actually don't, like, a lot of operators don't know what their LTV is. So it's probably like looking at Europe or just doing a simple calculation to figure out, to have a guesstimate of what that LTV is. But the thing, and they're using things like, what's the US market, like what's the potential of the US market, and sort of trying to come up with a figure there. But and probably looking at other markets, similar markets, similar GDP markets, and then having an estimate of the lifetime values from that. But it's still pretty early days, so we actually don't know what, like, a very accurate estimate of LTV is in the US.
I think we should ask these questions in 5 years.
Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
see how it works out. Joe, do operators in our side of the world put things different in terms of LTV?
Well, I wouldn't want to tell anybody, the guys are all experienced about what they're doing in their own business. But I think people have probably done a more blended approach these days. So they understand their acquisition costs, their promotional costs, what churn's costing them, what the blended approach, and maybe, like you said earlier, like the opportunity cost of missing out on people. I think that more blended approach and view of a customer is there. And, that pragmatic approach of, a consistent player who maybe doesn't have the highest LTV, maybe those kind of customers are good for the brand anyway, with regards to search and stuff. So, and because they use your products and they test your product, they're evangelists for your product. So just because they don't have the highest LTV doesn't mean they're not an important customer to you. I think brands do understand that. So that's all I would say on that point, really.
Okay, so a question that maybe many have asked, how does player engagement differ from player retention? And are casinos and sportsbook operators approaching these goals differently?
So I would say player engagement is ensuring the players actively using your product, whereas player retention is more about preventing churn, preventing them from leaving or reactivating them, so that's more like player retention is sort of like ensuring they stay with your platform. They're there. And they haven't left. And player retention is the active use of your product. So, whether that means like spending more time, like, just spending time on your product, using features, doing certain actions, whether that's making more bets and so forth. So I think that's, for me, the difference between player engagement and player retention.
As a marketing expert, but somehow it connects.
Yeah, of course. One's a product of the other. You would hope anyway. And that, like we said, brands have done brilliantly in the engagement world. They offer guides, they help people, they offer features for free. You get to watch videos, you get to play games for free, all of those things, help with player engagement. And it's entertainment as well. Yes, there is gambling. Yes, there is the hard nuts and bolts of the money, but it's an entertainment industry as well. And I do think that the industry understands that.
Yeah.
And I think everybody would say that they're trying to get the best experience for their customers, without doing anything untoward, really. So
it's like the saying goes that thank Mark Zuckerberg that he remembered your birthday.
Yeah.
Okay, so just one before we finalize. We have around 3-4 questions. Can you discuss how regulation and compliance issues impact player engagement, and how does this vary from by market? Let's start with North America.
So I think, again, like North America being relatively new, like there's very basic regulations around marketing. I think what they're talking about in North America is, looking and learning from Europe and trying to sort of self-regulate, sort of talking about it. Yeah. Emphasis on talking, but they're talking about sort of like, self-regulating marketing. Right now, obviously you can't contact, people who have opted out of messaging, or you need to look at RG, any sort of RG regulations as well. But in terms of there's not those big marketing regulations that you see in a lot of the European markets about, like, having certain terms and conditions being shown and being able to market in certain areas. So that's still a relatively new area. And it's probably something that we may see regulations in if the US market does not self-regulate.
Well, hopefully everything will work out well, not like on our side of the world, right, Joe, with the GDPR and the e-cookies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of things that have happened. There's a lot of, we've had the big industry players stand up and try and look after customers, and there's a new iteration of that will be coming out. Some markets don't allow people who haven't passed their know your customer to be marketed to. So that's a little bit of, marketers can't do their bit of commercial optimization there. So what do they do once players in life? And then we have, we're talking about real time, but we have some markets where they're not allowed to market where most of the sport's on, because they're not allowed to market after a certain time period in the evening or in the morning. But that's when a lot of the sport happens. And then, like TV bans and things like that. So how do you work around those? Is going to be interesting.
Yeah, it basically fuels the black market rather than contributing to the licensed zones. All right. So, Jenny, can you discuss the idea of 360-degree player engagement in the US market? How does traditional media interact with online channels and other outreach vectors to influence player behavior?
So you probably read a lot about the different partnerships or acquisitions between media companies and even physical venues and sports betting operators. So you've got those sort of more traditional media companies or venues becoming sports betting operators themselves, or being part owners of a sports betting operator. So there's a lot more linkages, basically. So you also see sports leagues and sports teams having partnerships with the operators too. So really what the whole 360 experience is you're going to have, like, instead of sort of having your sports betting tied to the sports betting operator, tied to your app or the website, you're going to have that, sort of like the odds or opportunities to bet in different areas around sports. So whether you go to a venue, whether you go to a restaurant, like a sports bar, or you're looking at a game itself, like streaming one of the games, there's going to be a lot more around betting there. So whether that's the opportunity to bet in venue, through the screens like in the stadium, or at a sports bar when you can order and they probably have an iPad there for you to sort of make bets on, or play, pick 'em games or free bets. So a lot more opportunities to promote and market in different avenues. So it's going to allow people to share the experience. It's sort of like it becomes more of an experience than just like betting. So it's a full sporting experience that they have. It's going to have like your fans, your sports fans be bettors, and your bettors be sports fans as well. So it's just becomes more of an experience, I think, which is a little bit different to I think the European markets, where it's a little bit more individualized. Like, you know, you go to a match to watch a sports game, and you go onto the site to make a bet. Here, it's sort of everything becomes a little bit mixed in and linked together.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the nature of the sports in America as well, right? Yeah. You're used to it being an entertainment thing. In football, soccer in the UK, don't communicate to people. Like, a lot of the time, someone goes to a game, that 90 minutes is their 90 minutes. Yeah. So some people, you communicate to them. Some people, that's their 90 minutes. Let them do what they want to do. But in America, it's more of a, like Jenny was saying, I think it's more of that 360 holistic approach. They have, you know, you're used to all the halftime shows, the quarter time shows, the pre-game, post-game, all of those things.
Very much entertainment.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the entertainment industry. So
yeah, exactly.
And I think they're just much more actively engaging with the players. Like, it's this active experience that they have. And I think incorporating betting into it means that they're like invested into the sports as well. So they're invested into the game, the outcome, the moments. So, you know, because you don't need to just bet on the outcome. You can bet throughout like different points throughout the game. You know, who scored first, who's the first, who throws the longest, etc. So you're more invested into what's happening around you.
Yeah, in Europe we are a bit slower, more relaxed, more chill. All right, so in relatively new markets like the US, how important are ease of use and value to sports bettors and online gaming players?
I think it's ease and value important, not just because the market is new, but it's just what people have gone used to, you know. So it's what they're used to with everything around us. So the example that I gave before, you know, with the whole like Netflix and Amazons and all that, it makes it easy, and you see the cheapest item that you want to buy, you know. So that's where the value comes. And I think value comes with competition, obviously. You know, you can't be the expensive sports book. You can't be the one with the worst odds. You don't want to be known as the one with the worst odds. So I think value comes with competition, but it's you know, you don't have to be the one with the best odds. You just have to be comparable and, you know, not and reasonable.
Got it.
But for ease, like it's all about convenience. The easier you make it to bet for someone, the more likely they're going to do it. If it takes little to no effort, then why not? So if you make it, if you give them a betting proposition that they're interested in, and it's easy to do, they're probably going to do it. So really, it's just making it easy, fun for them, and for them, it's going to make the game more interesting. So why not?
Yeah, before I ask you, Joe, about the same thing, I just want to point out that a couple of years ago, I'm not going to name that company, they had an innovation about when you're watching a game on TV, you just have a snap of that match, and instantly you have all the sports betting operators and their odds, so you can instantly place a bet anywhere. So it was an interesting innovation, but they had trouble with the broadcasting rights, so they did not implement it eventually, but it was a great idea back then.
Yeah.
So Joe, how much of a priority do sports bettors and gamers in the EU, the UK, place on ease of use and value, and why is that different from the US?
Yeah, I think I touched on it before around like the traditional betting companies in the UK. I think that still is a big thing, especially the audience that they have themselves. I think betting with that company means something to the customers. And I don't know whether that would be the same in America. You know, betting with a certain entertainment brand will be better than betting with another entertainment brand in America. It might be people might not have any loyalty to it, but that's definitely a thing in the UK. And then, you know, we have also, you know, like Jenny was saying, like best odds, best proposition, what works, what doesn't work. Some things work really well on mobile, some really work really well on desktop. So again, for the marketeer, it's difficult, right? Because some people might use somewhat bet in one certain betting shop because it's near the house. They might use the app because the app for a different betting is better, but then the desktop might have better odds. So they might use all three. So how, as a marketer, do you know who they are is a difficult one. So like I said, I mean, we don't run a betting company, but I would say know who you are. Like in the UK, is know who you are. Look after your customers, and you know they'll look after you essentially. I think, and then we as consumers in the UK have become a much less lenient, I would say, with, you know, payment terms, speed of use, all of those things. I think people used to put up with that, but, you know, waiting a week for your payment to come out, you know, bet not being put on because you didn't tick something, things like that. People just don't put up with that anymore. Used to, but not anymore.
It all has to be seamless.
Yeah.
So let's move to the final question, and for the audience that has sticked around, this is the most important one of all. So what factors influence a player to use one sportsbook or a digital platform over the other? This is very important because is their strategy there? And is it all about value proposition or brand recognition? And do the other consideration come into play as well?
So I think it differentiates for each player. So similar to what Joe has spoken about previously, you want to have the personalized experience. There's going to be some players that care about value. There's going to be some players that care about just, you know, recognition and trust for the brand. There's going to be some players that care about convenience and which is the easiest and less painful for them to use. There's going to be ones that care about something else completely different, like this brand is attached to a celebrity and they really like the celebrity or something. So I think it's understanding that players are different, and if you have a specific proposition, because there is room for people, you know, for multiple players out there. And if you know what your specific proposition is and how you want to target your players, then I think that's also important. If you're all about value and the best odds, then those are the types of players that you want, then it's important to sort of focus on that. If you're looking at sort of like a wider audience and it's about, maybe personalized communication to each and every single one of them a little bit differently, then that's what you want to focus on as well. So there's so many different factors that influence players. I think one, you need to sort of decide as a brand, what is it that you want? Like what types of players you want in there? How do you want to focus on it? And then you think about the players and then be customer centric towards them.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
I would probably say that brand recognition is a big thing. I think you'll have seen maybe this week or last week, the UK market, maybe not so much in Europe, but the UK market is very difficult for like a challenger brand at the moment, because there've been so many M&As that, you know, some brands in the UK have 5 or 6, maybe the top 5 or 6 apps in the App Store, and it's all run by the same company.
Yeah.
So they've all got the same. So they've got the same budget. They've got the CPA. They've got the biggest marketing budget. So they've got all the TV rights. So how does a challenger brand break through that? So is it value proposition? Yes. Is it the actual quality of their product? Yes. And does that come down to that customer experience that we've been speaking about? Marketing in real time, knowing who your customer is, and giving them that experience, and then being known as that company that does that. Maybe that would be a way of doing it. But yeah, I wouldn't say it was easy at the moment for anybody in the UK at the moment. It's an interesting time.
Yeah, or just go eccentric like Paddy Power does.
So they've got their hook, haven't they?
They have always been unique, so
yeah. But again, they're big company around, right? They've got a lot of the brands, so that's going to be for the traditional brands as well. How do they iterate what they are when they're such a big global brand? And how does that translate, right? How does that translate to other markets?
I remember we predicted this stuff around 2007, 2006, when the mergers and acquisitions were starting, that it's not going to be easy. It's like similar to a marriage, because these two companies have to work together to start working together. They all have different staff. They all have different strategies. So usually with the merger, with the M&A, it takes a while until they get on track. But yeah, like you said, in the App Store, they have multiple apps that belong to the same company. All right, so any final words?
No, just thank you to everybody who's finished listening. Hopefully we weren't too boring for you.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, thank you for sticking around.
All right.
And thank you, Zoltan, for having us on.
Hey, it's our pleasure. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you everyone for tuning in and listening. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channels, and see you next week. Goodbye.
Thank you for joining. Be sure to check back next week for the next HIPTHER Talks, and subscribe on Amazon Music, Overcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, and Pandora.